Hello, everyone. We are on a rekt newsletter, or should I say newspaper. So I'm with Sam, mostly known as SBF. Sam is the CTO of FTX, which is a derivative exchange platform, and also the founder and CEO of Alameda Research, where they do arbitrage, liquidity provider, market maker, all things DeFi, and also probably traditional finance. Welcome on board, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do you mind giving a quick introduction about yourself, your history and background for the people that probably don't know you, even if you've been very probably one of the most active actor in a space over the past few months?
It's a good question. So, I mean, it's a little all over the place in crypto, but I started out, I guess, my career at Jane Street Capital, trading international ETFs there, and then in 2017, I left and started up Alameda Research, it's a crypto quant trading firm. And then last year I started FTX, a crypto derivatives exchange. And for the last 5 months or so, I've also been spearheading Project Serum, it's a decentralized ecosystem built on Solana.
Okay, I see. So you were a quant boy that end up in decentralized finance because you saw you didn't want to miss the train, basically.
In a few different ways, yeah. And I think that a lot of this was just seeing the sort of like massively increased interest in DeFi over the last 6 months. But part of it was also, as I sort of explored it more, started to think that there is really huge potential for it, but also that that it was really being held back by a lot of the design, and that was sort of the genesis of Project Serum.
Okay, I see. So how do you differentiate your activity between Alameda Research and FTX if you have to give a quote on each of them to describe the activity behind those both institutions?
Yeah, so Alameda Research is a proprietary liquidity provider. It does quantitative trading, arbitrage, market making, OTC trading, and sort of other similar things in crypto. And it's active on most major platforms. And its primary function is finding mispricings, providing liquidity there, and doing arbitrage. And it's not where I'm spending most of my time these days, although it is quite active, in the space. FTX is a crypto derivatives exchange. It's a centralized exchange. And so, FTX has futures, perpetual swaps, spot markets, fiat on-ramps, structured products, an OTC desk, and other things on a bunch of different underlying coins. Something like the 5th largest exchange in crypto, and is it's like a customer-facing exchange where customers trade those products against each other. And so it's a pretty different operation than Alameda. It's very much customer-facing, very much product-focused, and trying to provide the services and products that the customers want, as opposed to Alameda, which is entirely proprietary internal trading firm, which is just providing liquidity all over the crypto space.
Okay, I see. Okay, thanks for the quick introduction. So the reason of this interview is because rekt newsletter did a post about like a week ago. It seems like it was ages ago. About the title was "Well Hand SBF and Blue Kirby. And well, let me actually share the screen. So basically, Rekt is it's kind of like a newspaper. The vision of the existence of Rekt, so you can rekt.ghost.io, was started over a weekend. It's because basically Rekt give a voice to the voiceless, or basically it's a platform for journalism investigation based on facts. So whatever it's actually true, and if people can actually verify transaction on chain, meaning they can provide Etherscan links and anything that is based on real activity, then we'll basically create a post about it. And so I'm not responsible for creating those posts, even if I'm the founder of, I mean, I just create a platform for people to describe such activity on the network. And yeah, so basically in this post, we explain a few different things that happened about a week ago in the DeFi world, and you came as a main actor, and apparently you were not very happy by the information that were shared on the post about activity on Cream, Blue Kirby relationship, and you probably shorting some asset, DeFi asset, using your centralized FTT token. Do you mind giving, yeah, basically explaining your point of view and why it was not very well accurate information for you on your side?
Yeah, so I'm going to sort of put aside the Blue Kirby part of it, which I think is a pretty complex and separate topic. Although I do think that in general the industry sort of whiffed on that one and misinterpreted what was going on. But looking at the in terms of the Cream part of it, I think I'll just start by saying, like, yeah, this is a complicated topic. I don't know what the right answer is, and I think that, like, there's a pretty decent case for changing the collateral factor of FTT or imposing overall caps on the fraction of the Cream lending protocol that a single asset can be. So I don't think that it's clear cut exactly what the takeaway or answer should be from it. I don't want to sort of like present myself as if I do know the answer to that. What I do think, a lot of the takes on it have been pretty one-sided and not super well thought out. I think in particular, sort of the the snapshot vote, I think that proposal is pretty shitty. And I think it's sort of like in a number of ways was just like poorly thought out and over the top. And so I was just sort of like going through how I sort of think about it, and the ways in which I think that it was sort of like I get it. I don't know what the intention was behind it, so it's hard for me to it's
Well, I
hard
think
for me to sort of just. But
I think the community is really. I mean, you're a new face in the community. You've been you're pretty strong. I mean, most people, they know you from a couple of months ago. You suddenly appeared on the top of the leaderboard of the DeFi space, and I think the reason for that is because you basically took over a SushiSwap project by um, being given the key to the project, and now you using those tools or this power to interact with the DeFi space. So for example, like that's the reason why now people are a little bit maybe frustrated,
yep,
or a little bit curious or suspicious about your intention in the Ethereum ecosystem. So for example, let's go a little bit backward and get back on the story that put you in front of the entire DeFi or the Ethereum community with the project SushiSwap. So do you mind giving a quote? I would like a quote from you summarizing your thought on SushiSwap, for example.
yeah, totally. So what sort of happened there is basically that there was there's like there's SushiSwap, which is an AMM. There's a fork of Uniswap, and it was gaining a lot of popularity. It was unclear exactly what the future was going to be, but had a ton of locked assets, a ton of a ton of attention on it, and then right before sort of a critical moment in its path where it was going to actually do the fork and launch the DEX, Nomi, one of the founders of it, took the dev share of the treasury, and it's I think
So you
that
had
sort of
so you had like an arrangement, or what kind of arrangement or agreement did you have with Chef Nomi to
yeah.
give those keys?
So I mean, I was sort of like the rest of the world, pretty surprised when that happened, and not happy. Sort of the interpretation of this was like he just stole the dev fund, and I do think it's worth noting that there's a lot of ambiguity
Well, I
over
mean,
what the use of that.
how much sushi do you have with those funds?
So the fund had 10% was getting basically 10% of the sushi. So as sushi was airdropped in yield, 10%. This I say dev fund, community fund. There's a lot of ambiguity over what the right phrasing of this was. So it's 10% of the sushi, which was at the time, was I think it's like 5 million sushi,
Well, now, yeah,
which was
now the market is like 6 million, but back
right.
then when sushi was like
Back then it's like $10 million or something like that.
like probably like
Um,
yeah, like probably like 18 million.
it was a bit less when it happened. I think it was like 11 million when it happened, but still a pretty sizable amount. And I think that the most popular interpretation of it was basically like you just stole the community fund, just stole a shit ton of money, like you basically rugged, and like that's sort of the end of SushiSwap. And I do think that like there's sort of another side to this story, which is like legitimate ambiguity over what the fund was supposed to be used for, and Nomi sort of saying like, look, like I was sort of the founder and the dev. This is a dev fund. Yeah, and I'm not even taking 10% forever. Taking the 10% so far. So that's like 3% for the founder and dev. That's not a crazy amount. I think everyone else was $1 million with no warning, and like yeah, it would have been one thing if you put up a proposal saying like, hey guys, I think that this is fair, and it would have been also one thing if you had like from the beginning said, hey, this pool is basically mine, and
So
like
you're saying
I'm gonna decide what to do with it.
so you're saying that got you received the key of SushiSwap without really knowing about it. That certainly
Yeah, I mean,
so
I've
you
been
never
obviously following.
so you never had a chat with Sushi Master about being able to receive those keys, and you basically like
Oh no,
it texts you on Twitter and said, oh, do you want to I'm handling over the project to Sam.
that's right. I'd never talked to him about this. I was not involved in the development of SushiSwap at all. I've been obviously following it closely,
But
but
do you understand
nothing
that
else.
what you're saying is put you in on the spot of like people are being very suspicious about like someone, a random actor in the space, being able sending 10 million or 15 million worth of sushi to Sam, meaning that for some people it might look like you are the sushi master. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think what I'd say is like I was, there was several week-long period where I did have, the keys to the keys to the dev fund, though there was nothing left in the dev fund. But also the keys to migrate and do a few other things. And it was a crazy day. I mean, would be really hard for someone to know what to think in the middle of that day. Like it was completely bananas. But what happened in the end basically was I was sort of asleep. Like someone shouted out that like there's a tweet saying that Nomi was going to give us the keys. I was shocked. Kind of there goes my week. And basically what we did is we sort of did the things that were meant to happen. We completed the transition to SushiSwap pools, and the the transition to multi-sig.
did you ever receive a message from Aiden?
From who?
Aiden, the founder of Uniswap. I don't.
Oh, hey, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's subtweeted me quite a number of times on Twitter, but a DM about anything here. I think like, you know, all of the interactions are public here. It's just what's going on our Twitter feeds.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that he was probably not really happy about you taking over the project SushiSwap, right?
Um, I strongly suspect you're right. I obviously don't know for sure, but he was definitely not happy with SushiSwap, and definitely not happy to see it get support, and definitely very happy to see it get rugged. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of dancing on the
So do you
graves.
think that it was actually because of SushiSwap was actually pushed into the Uni token, and if SushiSwap was never actually happened, the Uni token would probably not be live in the market.
That's my best guess. Obviously, I don't know for sure, but I think that's sort of the common guess, and I think it's probably right. Although again, like, you know, who knows for sure? You know, it's not something I can like that I have sort of more knowledge than is public about. But yeah, I would guess that that's what sort of pushed it. Well, probably going to happen eventually, no matter what. But I think that's probably what happened to,
Yeah, I mean,
you know, what caused it to sort of happen when it did.
like SushiSwap was a direct shot to Uniswap. Then you took over the project, and then I've seen like some post from you on Twitter saying that Uniswap is way over valued, because if you look at the entire TVL of Uniswap and the TVL of SushiSwap, uh, SushiSwap is 85 million valuation in the market, was like 80 from your tweet, and Uniswap is like more than 4 billion. So you're basically saying that people are stupid to buy the Uni token, and they should probably jump into SushiSwap.
You know, maybe like a non-financial advice version of that,
Yeah, obviously. I mean,
but
this call is
right.
not financial advice, obviously.
Yeah, but you know, without telling anyone what I think they should do, I think there's a pretty decent argument for that. You know, I think that like, again, now who knows what'll happen to prices in the future? Like sometimes things that I think are overvalued just go up more, and
So
sometimes I
what do you
think things
think?
are undervalued just go to zero. But
Yeah. So what's your thought on the short, medium, or long term future of SushiSwap? Are you guys like building, or you're just leaving it as a auto market maker?
it's yeah, it's a good question, and the basic answer is, you know, it's decentralized. Like sort of a bunch of people are building on it and putting up proposals to build on it, and trying to coordinate what's going on. And I'm sort of like only involved on the outskirts of it. You know, after having completed the transition to Sushi's, you know, the transition to its own AMM and things like that, I passed control of, you know, the dev fund and stuff back to a multi-sig wallet. And you know, I'm sort of around maybe as an advisor is the right way to think of it. You know, I sort of like give thoughts on it. I've written up some posts of like the things I would be prioritizing. Um, and you have answered a bunch of questions and given feedback to people who are working on it, but I'm not personally spending, you know, time building stuff on it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, makes sense. We'll get back to SushiSwap after, because the main reason of the call is the what happened on the cream, and I mean, public addresses, or maybe Alameda's research or FTX, and people have been really looking at your activity on the FTT token, and shorting activity. So can you walk me through the chronology of Cream, and what do you think happened, and what people were really kind of pissed off about you on public?
Yeah, so you know, and what happened there basically was, you know, Alameda moved a bunch of FTT to Cream, and you know, borrowed some other tokens with it. And um, this was sort of, as is the case in DeFi, uh, all on chain, so you can sort of track down in some cases what's happening, and people often whiff on what's happening, but sometimes they're right. Um, and it's pissed a lot of people off. I think there's sort of a lot of confusing things going on here, and I think that if you look at sort of the snapshot proposal that was created in response to this, I think it's sort of like all over the place and pretty confused. And I think that like it's sort of like naively maybe reads as one coherent point, but I think
Well, I
it's
mean,
not. I think that
what do you think people are confused? You took 80 million worth of FTT, you put them on cream, probably like taking 40% of the entire like cream collateral, and then you borrowed uni, a CRV, I think, and the other one was uni CRV. What was the other one that you borrowed? And then Y earn token. So and then you send them on Binance and Yobi, and people were tracking your activity, and then they saw like you got back on the well, it looks like you shorted, but then you said you didn't short it. I mean, honestly speaking, from my point of view, a trader needs to trade. You know, a good trader is someone that trades. So, but yeah, it looks a little bit. I mean, the point of view of people were like, okay, this FTT token is mostly controlled by FTX. It's a centralized tokens, and you're using the decentralized economy. You're using decentralized tokens to short them and to basically like smash their project with your activity, and probably also using Alameda research to probably take a short on the market because you know that you have the power to control to be able to leverage or hedge your positions on the market.
And I think that's where it starts to get a little bit, I think that's where it starts to get a little bit confused, because I think the thing I would say is basically that's just like there's a lot, and you sort of have to go through them one by one. So sort of like walking through those, the point about shorting, I think, is maybe the point that's like the most confused. So first of all, I just to establish just like borrowing doesn't necessarily mean shorting. It can mean shorting, but it could also mean borrowing to use to yield farm. It could mean borrowing to use to provide liquidity on decentralized or centralized exchanges.
Well, I mean, let me stop you. If you do that, why not borrowing USDC or USDT, and then you basically less expose yourself to the market?
Well, what liquidity are you providing? What are you yield farming? So some yield
farming.
Well,
you could provide it to Curve, for example, Curve.finance.
You could, but maybe that's not the highest yield thing, right? Like, there's lots of liquidity farming pools, and like sometimes the highest yield ones aren't the stablecoin ones. Sometimes the highest yield ones are
sure, but obviously,
pools.
publicly speaking, if you borrow asset on the market by lending FTT, people will assume that you're about to short them, so they will probably like short it on the market as well, meaning that you will be exposed to a token that is getting smashed on the market, right? So I mean, your hedge here is kind of like really one way. You are going to short it because there's no other way. Otherwise, you will not like publicly, or you probably do it like from multiple addresses. But my guess is your best hedge is to short it because you know that the public will know about it. And it was actually, people were saying that it was intentional from you that you did it from public addresses so people could spot it. And then actually you could
That's definitely not true. And I mean, sorry, it's true that people are saying that. That definitely was not the intention. There's no there's.
I mean, your address, your address is on Nansen publicly. People know exactly what you're doing, and
so what you mean? Many addresses here. I think you're missing on this one. The reason people knew who this was it's not of FTT. Nothing that could be done. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I understand. Sorry, it's not necessarily you, but
mostly. I just want to, as a disclaimer, most of those questions were asked by the rekt community. So this doesn't actually present my point of view. I have nothing against you. I will just ask those questions, and yeah, it's not my personal view on the matter, because obviously myself, I'm also deeply involved in market maker, liquidity provider, arbitrage. So I understand what you're doing.
Yep. So, I think basically like being public was definitely not the intention. We didn't bring this up. It was a while before anyone did. We're kind of sad when anyone did, just of all the shitstorm that ensued. No one brought it up for like a month after it had started. That's another thing. This is not like a recent thing. Like it happened a while ago. And frankly, there isn't a whole lot that could be done about privacy here because just the quantity of FTT involved. But it being public was just a pure downside for us there's not something that was at all desired. And I think that like you're making some claims about the reaction to people, or not you're making claims, you're sort of channeling some claims people have made about what reaction you think people reacted in both ways to seeing this. And there's like it's a pretty wide variety of like directional things people did on. None of that was the intention. None of that is like what we're looking for. It was just done because sometimes there's demand for particular types of capital, and like when you look at yield farms nowadays, like often the highest yield ones have demand for specific assets. And sort of which assets those are definitely change over time because which yield farms are yielding the most just change over time. But that's one piece of it. Another piece to provide liquidity on centralized exchanges, and to do that you need both sort of buy side and sell side. So you'd need like both if you're trying to provide on like a USDC uni order book, you would need both USDC and uni, and so you'd need to have inventory of both. And then the last thing is that some of this was a hedge, and it was hedged because there's a lot of long DeFi positions, and how many you can put on is gated in some part by how much you're hedging. The more you're hedging, the more you're covering your downside risk on those. And so it's Alameda it to be hedged, and this is sort of like one way to get there.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, SushiSwap and Uniswap, they're not very big friends, so
yeah, it's true, but they are still pretty correlated in price.
Yeah, they are, but yeah, so maybe, well, I mean, for me, like, you remember like a couple of years ago, Coinbase was under scrutiny because people inside the company were able to take a long or short on decisions that the company were making and publicly. For example, like listing token. Those medium paths have been very, very strong, and you could basically build a monitoring bot that could track instantly the listing of those tokens, and you can take positions. So maybe how do you ensure that there's no sensitive information from FTX, such as your customers' position liquidation levels, that end up in the ears of Alameda team, basically? Like,
yeah,
it could be like pretty difficult because you're sitting on the board of both of them and you're the founder and CEO.
Yeah, so there's the Alameda team doesn't have any special access to to FTX positions or trading data or anything like that. It's not what they would do. It's not what I would do. It would be sort of a pretty shitty thing to do, and it'd be a pretty bad long-term strategy because frankly speaking, like, it would that would be endangering a huge amount of future value and a huge amount of growth of the FTX platform, and that's just not worth it. Like, what, even if there were a short-term gain from it, that would sort of be swamped by the long-term cost. And so my first answer is it doesn't happen. It doesn't have access to that. Also, it would just be a pretty bad decision and a pretty short-sighted one to try and go down that route. And so that's basically my answer to that. One other thing that I'll note on sort of the topic of the the cream bar is that, like, I think people are probably overestimating the amount of impact that some things have, especially on like longer time scales, and that, like, a month-old $1 million borrow in some of these tokens is not going to 1 month later cause a 20% price decrease in the token. Like, A, the timing doesn't match up, but B, it's just like that's not big enough. Like,
well, I mean, it's big enough in the DeFi space.
I don't think so. I think like $1 million is not that much on it.
$100 million on a 4 billion.
100 million would absolutely do it. If this were $100 million position taken in uni or YFI, that would absolutely have impact. Like no doubt, 1 million. I'm not saying it's zero impact, but like it's not going to be like a giant noticeable thing. And yeah, I think there's like a pretty big difference between those.
Okay. So if you had to do it again, you would do the exact same thing.
Well, I'm not sure there's PR consequences to this. I think like the I'm like didn't have a whole lot of fun dealing with the PR aspects of this, and maybe that just like outweighs that, and like would like to take advantage of basically being able to utilize all the services offered in DeFi, and would like to take part in that, and would like to be able to be an active user of Cream, but like if the answer is that like
So you
a
talk
bunch
you talk to the CEO. You
about
apparently
what?
well, apparently was very happy for you to put 88 or 80 million worth of FTT into the platform. He said that you were killing it, like not killing it in the sense that killing the Cream, but like
right.
yeah.
Yep. I think from his perspective, like he wants growth of the Cream platform, and this was causing significant.
Yeah, go ahead.
What?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, and this was causing significant growth in, I mean, obviously in TVL and volume, significant growth in the amount of interest paid to lenders, growth in the amount of assets available, and just generally, I think more utilization of a platform tends to be good for it. And so I think that like I I think his take, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing this is what he was thinking. I think it is like and I think this is also sort of this would be is that like in general, just more usage of platforms is good, and that's sort of a pretty strong prior.
So you're saying,
especially as
I mean, apparently the VOD, I don't understand the VOD because the VOD was like partially decreased the amount of FTT. I mean, what does it mean partially?
right.
Like it's kind of like
right. Yeah, I agree. Like I think it would be reasonable to do some modifications here, but like I don't like that option just because like who the fuck knows what it means? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think like you'll be added to the? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you're a big fan of multi-sig. I think like whatever there's a multi-sig, you want yourself to be added into it. So are you going to be added into the Cream multi-sig?
Well, I think that it's not so much that like I don't think that I'm that big of a fan of it. It's mostly just like a pain to be part of these. But a lot of people reached out asking.
SushiSwap is a Uniswap is probably one of the biggest. Is probably one of the biggest project into the in the ecosystem. Then was Fork, and then SushiSwap. Boom, you become a multi-sig in multi-sig. Then and then another project, which is probably the second biggest project in the ecosystem, Curve.finance, was forked, Swerve, and then you announced that you'll be joining the multisig. So maybe you will do the same with Cream. So I think the question from the community is really about: are you trying to make friends, or are you trying to be evil? Like in the sense that apparently you're a big fan of those folks and you want to be added, and you don't actually care about public opinion. You just go for it.
So the first thing I'll say is that this was not generally us reaching out to try to be multi-sig. This was generally us
you could say no. Like
we could say no, right? We could say no, and we didn't say no. And why was that? And in retrospect,
oh yeah, and Cream is also kind of like a fork from Compound, but not really, because Robert, CEO of Compound, is also probably like really active in a project.
Yeah, and it's sort of like diverged a bit more in what it's
basically
doing.
Cream is doing whatever Compound cannot do. That's my guess.
Right. So I think basically like it wasn't sort of like us starting the conversation. Like other people were reaching out and asking us if we'd be willing to be multi-sigs for these. And again, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe like if it sort of like causes PR issues for us, and like maybe it's not worth it. But I think we said yes just because we want to support the DeFi ecosystem, and like it's hard to find people who make sense as multi-sig members. And like
you could put your name into Compound or the multi-sig of Curve, like original projects. Like people that have been working very hard, small team, months of research, months of research, and then they suddenly get forked, and then you know, like on the like for example, oh yeah, I forgot, I actually also you did added yourself into, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but also the White-earned kind of um, uh, uh, shit show with Blue Kirby, because apparently you retweet Blue Kirby ICO project, and people were like, interesting. So it's not only like multi-signature, it's not only fork projects, but also some very strange activity from big strong actors in the space.
So I think what I'd say to your point of like why some multi-sigs and not the other is, again, I'm not the one choosing these. Like I didn't sort of like reach out and say, hey, can I please be multi-sigs of these projects in general? I think it's more projects approach me and say, hey, are you willing to be a multi-sig? And when they do that, I usually say yes. And so, you know, I said yes to a number that approached me. I think like I don't think I was ever asked to be a member of the Curve multi-sig. I think if I were, I would have said yes. As this is entirely
Not
just like
it's
which projects asked me to do it.
I just noted, so you probably receive requests maybe, but okay, well, so what happened on the Blue Kirby ICO? What did you retweet it? Did he ask you to retweet his ICO?
He didn't ask me to retweet it. I just saw it. It seemed like, I mean, it seemed cool. It seemed like a lot of people were talking about it, and I, I mean, I tweet and or retweet like 100 things a day. It's not like
But you have, I mean, you have like 45,000 followers. It's like, you know,
yep.
it's kind of like Andre from Wire and saying, uh, don't follow, my staff, but basically, I mean, you understand the retail. Most people, they don't really understand the tech. Most
So
people, they don't understand things. And as soon as they are idol or hero, they tweet about something, obviously we'll have thousands of people. Can you imagine that when, as soon as you tweet or Andre tweets, you got like those ton of like Telegram scammers group, when Moon, they all like getting crazy. So obviously like, it's kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't say like pathetic, but kind of very strange to me that saying that, oh, I just tweet like a lot per day, but please don't listen to my tweets.
I mean, I think it's something a little weaker than that. I think it's like, oh, here's the thing people are saying is cool. You know, I'm like sort of like we go down this path, and the answer is I just like get it off Twitter. If like I'm not like if I'm just not allowed to retweet anything, sure, I'll just like get off Twitter and not allowed to do anything. And maybe that's the answer. Like maybe the answer is like the crypto community is bad, and like we have to get rid of it
Yeah.
because
Well, I think
you know if you
99%
say
of,
anything, then you know that's like and again maybe that is the answer. Maybe we just have to get rid of Twitter and have to get rid of
well, I mean, I'm not sure
communication
if you saw,
between people.
the article from the Central Bank of Canada. They were saying that most of the people that are willing to get involved in crypto are illiterate people. So, I mean, it's kind of like, obviously, whatever you tweet, people will just get crazy about it. That's a fact.
So I mean I'm sort of like famous among other things. One of the things I'm most famous for on Twitter is the number of times I say things aren't investment advice. It's all over the place. It's in my profile. It's in a lot of my tweets. I go about as far out of my way as I can to try and make it clear that like when I tweet, I'm not trying to talk about what I think people should or shouldn't buy. I think that's a really complicated question. And it's like, you know, I tweet enough to even attempt to answer that. I think that like, you know, at some point, like there's just like not more you can do. And the answer is if like, you know, saying 3 times a day that nothing I say is investment advice on Twitter and
Well,
putting it on
yeah,
my profile
but I
is not
also,
enough, then like the answer
since,
is just like no one should be allowed to have a Twitter account. And I just feel very strongly that like this is pretty unreasonable.
yeah, maybe you're right.
I just think
I also
I
have
think you're
the
full of shit
no.
here.
Sorry.
And again, sorry, I don't mean you necessarily, but I mean, you know, like who you know, I think that sort of the sentiment is just like kind of whiffing here, and that like I think that there's a big difference between like building a pro. So first of all, on the like case of like retweeting things about a protocol that you're building, I think that's a different thing. And I think that like because first of all, you're presumably going to be much better informed on it, and second of all, it sort of like really compounds with the fact that you're building it. Although still, I think that it was like clearly not meant to be saying like Andre is not retweeting a link to use the protocol. If he were, I think that would have been pretty bad. You weren't, like, it's clearly just like JPEGs, and then people went on the blockchain, did digging, but sort of putting that aside, like I think that like I almost I think the conclusion of this would just be like just like executives in crypto can't communicate with the community.
Okay.
And maybe that's the answer, but I don't think that's what people want. I think this is another case of just like the sort of conclusion that this would
I don't think it's only like in a crypto community. You can go back to the traditional finance and look at Tesla or SpaceX with Elon Musk. Being when he was under lawsuit, like under scrutiny from the SEC.
Oh yeah, and to be clear, if I said like taking off Blue private at 420, that would have been very different, right? If I were like tweeting like I am going to buy all of these at a particular price, and that was the tweet, and also I run the project and have MNPI about it, like that's a very different case.
Yeah,
it's like hard to argue that that's like not intended, at least to some extent, as investment advice. I don't know, hard to argue a little strong, but like I totally get the worries in that case. This is pretty different, like a raw retweet of like a sort of like hard to discern blue GIF about a project that's not really been described yet, that I'm not running and hasn't launched yet. I think that's like,
so what do you think? So what do you think about what happened to Blue Kirby?
I don't know for sure, but like my read of the situation is basically like, first of all, he I think it's a he. I think that's like whoever they in case it turns out to be wrong, I did a pretty shitty job of launching it. I think that they really didn't think that part out well, and that like trying to sell a shit ton of NFTs before having described in detail how the project would work is not a good idea. I think that like it is sort of the direction that crypto is trending in, and I don't think it's a good direction.
Were you inside the community back in 2017 during the ICO craziness?
Not really. I joined crypto in like fall 2017, and it was not like me. It's completely on the outside. Yeah. So
I think the NFT Blue Kirby NFT style was exactly like the ICO.
Yeah, it definitely was reminiscent of that. It was not a good launch attempt, and I think they did it and then got some flack for it, which is not surprising.
So why? I mean, the question from the people is really like, why did you get yourself involved in that shit if you think that was not very well constructed?
So the first answer is like, I didn't know exactly, like I wasn't paying like a whole lot of attention to exactly what the order of things happening there was, and most of this was prior to any sales. This was like back when there's a bunch of sort of like vague tweets about this, and it was sort of like unclear exactly where it was going. There's only like a 12-hour period or something, after which the NFT sales started in force. I also think though, and I could be wrong about this, but I do think it's true, that like the intention was never to rug here. I think that is never what Blue Kirby was intending. I think that this was like intended to be, look, selling these NFTs, and this is going to be basically the initial distribution for whatever the blue or off blue token was going to do. And he did sort of say that, like there was some amount of disclosure at an extremely kind of vague and high level, but which direction this is going in. I think they're pretty surprised by.
Yeah, maybe you're right, but based on the previous activity from Blue Kirby and how he handled the Wi-Fi token, he could have just sent those tokens to an exchange and then that's it. But he publicly sold those tokens. He said
how many tokens was it?
Yeah, not much.
I don't think
Like,
it's that many. Like
yeah,
I don't get like
he was getting paid like 7,000. So people were like, he's the ambassador of the White Earn project and now selling all these tokens. I mean, for me, I don't care, to be honest. And I think everyone is, it's not like it was such a very small amount of tokens. I mean, like, I think it was in total like 80 or 25. I'm not sure. I'm a bit, it was
yeah, I don't know. It sounds about
0.04%,
right.
0.0, yeah, 4% of the entire supply. But then when he created NFT, this NFT project, obviously people were a little bit suspicious about the vision of the goal of or the intention. Um, yeah, well, I mean that's what it is.
So right, and I think that like, and I totally get that, and like I get why people were sort of like skeptical there, not sort of trying to argue against that, but I do think that it got pretty overblown, and that like, you know, it was a ham-fisted launch, but not an attempt to rug pull, and that like what happened was like some of the most toxic things I've ever seen in crypto coming out over the next 12 hours, like the kind of things that like definitely get
Well,
you thrown in jail.
you're putting the bar
Not what
very
Blue Kirby did, but what
very
people were saying
high.
about
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Very
Because
high. That thread was unbelievable. Like it's just like, you know, racial slurs per post was like above one, which is like not usually a thing that happens, and is just like pretty over the top, and like murder threats, like way too many of them.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
zero should be the number of those, you know.
I don't understand
And
people.
so I
I don't
think like,
understand. Yeah, exactly. I don't understand people because when they play the game, they play the rules of the game.
yeah,
If they make money, then they claim they got rich, like quick rich kid, and then they all like go on Twitter. But if they lose money by playing the same rules, then they all like try to kill the person who was actually building the product. That's why I don't like, because
yeah, I agree. It's like I think that like a reasonable response would have been like, hey, I'm skeptical and worried about this. I'd really like to see more information from Blue Kirby about this before it goes forward. I think they sort of owe it to the community to you know, to give more transparency about this, and I'd recommend no one, don't take part in this unless and until sort of there's more information on it. I think that would have been like a
or
pretty
if you
reasonable
yeah, or if
response.
you're 100% sure what you're doing. I mean, that's exactly like me. I mean, I got attacked on Twitter for um, saying that I was basically backing up Sushi Master and saying that what he did was not very um, like a crime or anything. And so basically, my point is like on the yield farming side, if you yield farm a token, like all those baguettes, like spaghetti token and all those different things, and you make money, it's basically someone on the other side buying those tokens. And then what people are saying is that, for example, there was a project lately that didn't even go to pool one or pool two. That's what people say. Like when you pool one is the
Yep.
token for liquidity provider, and pool two is the most dangerous one. Is the you get exposed to the entire token and to the entire like the net. I don't remember the project was like a couple of days ago, and then the guy just left the project, and people were like very frustrated about it, and they get this. They call him as a scammer. But my point, it's like Blue Kirby. He didn't actually let people get involved in pool one and pool two, but the game was like writing on a smart contract. And so instead of yield farming token and then selling to retail that don't understand a shit and making money, he made the money himself and then left.
And yeah, I totally get that. And I think that it's like, I think that if what he had done was like sell a bunch of the NFTs and then peace out, that would have been pretty bad. Like, that would have been like extremely deceptive. But it's not what he did. Like he made it. He was intending, I think, to like actually develop a platform and give tokens to people who participated. Then the pitchforks came out in mass, and so what they did was a day later they refunded everyone who took part in it, which I think was like a totally reasonable response to this. It was like, all right,
So you think
looks like this.
it felt like there was another post on rekt newsletter. I'm not sure if you saw it. Someone that was scamming people on Uniswap and then felt guilty about it, and then tried to reimburse those people using the same pool that he actually took the token from. So are you saying like maybe Blue Kirby got a little bit, he felt guilty and then felt bad and then tried to reimburse people, or maybe like a legal action, or people were just like,
Well, so I think that's why they went down the path of reimbursing people instead of what they were going to do, which was move forward with the project and yeah, they collected some funds for it, but like that was basically the pre-sale. And they were going to then build a project and airdrop the tokens to people who participated in it. And it was going to be, I mean, I don't know if it would have been good or bad. Like it depends on how good the project is in the end. But it would have been, you know, what they said they were doing, which was selling these basically worthless NFTs, but then airdropping the off-blue tokens on the people who bought them. And you know, you're basically sell by buying them. And I think that that's like, I don't know, is that scammy? It depends on whether really good faith attempt to execute on the project as it was you know proposed at the beginning. And so I think that's like not the worst thing in the world. And then I think the plan changed from like build a project and airdrop tokens on the people bought to like shit, no one wants this, like this is a shit show, let's just like undo all this
I see.
project anymore, but also I'll offer to reimburse anyone who took part, which I think was like a pretty reasonable response. Again, I don't think it was a good job of doing this project launch. Like I would have done it very differently. I would have like, if I were going to start with an NFT auction, I would have made like the most like baller NFT in history.
Well,
So that is actually something that like.
What about
but,
forking and putting yourself on multi-sig of Blue Kirby NFT ICO? Maybe you can just fork it.
I could. I'm going to be honest.
Sarcasm.
I don't really get at it. Right. You do not want me running an NFT project. At least not an NFT project where the NFTs are.
I think you do it. People will love it. But okay, let's leave the cream Blue Kirby for now. I can see like in the background you got Serum. Do you mind like jumping quickly inside what is Serum and what's the vision with this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, Serum, it's a decentralized ecosystem built on Solana. What does that mean? You know, basically where it came from was, I wanted to build a DeFi project, and I kept trying to do it, and I kept getting stymied by the same things. Just ran into the same buzzsaw, which was everything that I thought was cool and complicated used more throughput than Ethereum had. And so it was like none of it was going to work. And I basically had a choice of like build something on Ethereum that I don't like, something I really like, but it can't be on Ethereum, and it's going to have no users at the beginning.
You don't like Ethereum, or you like Ethereum?
The projects that I would have been building on Ethereum. It's like the things that I was excited to build were not things that Ethereum could support. And so, you know, it's sort of either I had to build something that I thought was going to be kind of lame, or I had to build something.
You didn't answer my question. Do you like Ethereum?
What do I think of Ethereum? Oh, depends on what you compare it to. I think it did amazing things for crypto. I think that it was like basically the first big smart contract chain. I think that revolutionized the industry. I think that like it made people realize for the first time that it's not just value or a token that you can have on chain. It's anything. You just program on chain, you know? And like anything you could imagine, at least theoretically speaking, you could do that on a blockchain.
Yeah, apparently the chairman of the CQ, or like a big institution in the US, said that if Bitcoin is email, then Ethereum is internet. And he said that a couple of hours ago. So I think that the market will get a little bit crazy. But basically you're saying you like Ethereum, but it's limited and you would like to see something bigger.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. And so like, you know, basically, I think that like, you know, I'd love to see an expansion of what it's been doing, and it going from like supporting a trading ecosystem to supporting a huge ecosystem.
You don't believe in layer 2, like Optimism?
I think that layer 2 is
Blueprint.
I mean, I think so.
Netnox in
right.
general.
I think there are cool things with it, but basically I think there are two problems. The first is if you're gonna have a layer 2, you might as well make it as fast as possible. A lot of these layer 2s are actually slower than the fast. Second, you might as well make it able to be a layer 1.
Well, Synthetics layer 2 is pretty fast. I mean, you can get like a reasonable amount of transaction for like not high frequency trading, but you can still like bench a 1,000 transaction and within a couple of seconds. So it's not bad.
So I don't know all of them, but most of them that I've looked at are like way faster than Ethereum, but actually still slower than the fastest layer 1s are. But some of them may be faster. But second, I'd say if you're building a layer 2, you might as well make it a layer 1 as well, so that it can have that functionality. And many of these are not built with that in mind.
I mean, ETH 2.0 is exactly what you're trying to
right. Yeah, and so we can get these 2.0 in a second.
Soon. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then the other thing, and one of the biggest things, is you lose composability when you go to layer twos, or at least you start to lose it.
Well, it's kind of funny you're saying that, because you built a bridge for Ethereum 1 into Solana and Serum, which is basically composability. So
it depends on what composability means. So you can build bridges, right? You can build bridges to move assets back and forth.
You could have bridges between synthetics, optimism, loopring, and MATLAB. Like, for example, like I think the first on the market auto market maker that was able to release a layer 2 is actually Curved Finance, and they built it. But I agree with you. It's complicated, because then you get isolated in your own liquidity, and then it's complicated to. But it could be built, yeah, and it's going to be built.
So, yeah, and I think what I'd say is that you can have asset bridges, but that's a different thing than full composability. Because it's true that they can build bridges between these places, but what you really want is to be able to have an on-chain program that can take an AMM plus a borrow lending book and turn that into a margin trading exchange. And if that's what you want, that requires a stronger amount of composability that you usually lose when you go between these barriers. And so you can manually bridge them, but that's different from an on-chain bridge.
So Serum is FTX, but decentralized way.
I think that's one vision for it, is can you take everything.
And what is the vision? And what is the vision of FTX? Going after BitMEX?
I mean, part of the answer is I don't know. We'll see what people want, but in sort of high level terms,
you guys are located in the same kind of like very probably not very far away from each other in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I mean, our office is 4 blocks away from where there's, or 2 blocks away from where there's I don't know if there's still in that office, but at least where it was.
Say hi to Arthur. It's probably like pretty busy right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a very happy time there. Yeah. Really the goal is like, can you build the best exchange you can? Like the exchange that offers the most to customers, says all the products they want, the liquidity they want, the usability they want, the GUI they want. Like, can you sort of like, build the most powerful, flexible trading experience for people? And I think that part of Serum is, can you even do that on chain? Can you build a product on chain that doesn't compromise with quality, something that people use and feel like
with so you're saying that Solana is the good fit. I mean, as a disclaimer, I'm a big fan of Solana, especially because of the team. Anatoly and the entire team inside are like great people and very knowledgeable and smart people. But so you're saying that the best way to build kind of like high frequency trading or derivative platform, decentralized way for you was Solana. Did you look into many other projects like Polkadot, Cosmos, Tezos?
Yep. Yeah, I did. And I think that like, what I would say is basically like, there are a lot of exciting chains. But when you start thinking about like, what's the end game here? What's like the most exciting thing? What's the biggest DeFi ecosystem you could build is huge, right? Like a billion people could be using it. Like a quarter of the world's companies could be building their products on chain, like the sort of like the vision here, the biggest vision is extremely exciting. And it's actually the radical transformative one that people sort of vaguely reference when they think about crypto or DeFi. And when you start thinking from that perspective, it becomes clear what you need isn't 50 times the TPS of Ethereum. You need as much as possible. Like that's just a limiting factor on how big this ecosystem can get. And so like, it's not a matter of having enough.
So you're saying like, you're saying like, basically because the tech and the silicon are exponentially increasing. So Solana is basically choosing kind of like the POY, the proof of work and plus proof of stake mix between what about chasing the bull of those increasing silicons, so we get up in power of computations, so then we can actually get more transaction, rather than Ethereum is basically like limited the block size and like not actually chasing this number of transactions. So there's a higher
exactly. there's a number of
It's a
things
good
here, and
bet.
that's one of the big ones.
It's a good hedge
It's,
because
yes.
basically you don't limit it yourself. You consume more power, but because the amount of silicons that you can place in a nano square meter are going to dramatically increase, then obviously being able to chase that aspect of the tech is probably a good bet and a good hedge.
That's basically right. And, you know, one of the big things about Solana, one of the as you said, so the big, you know, driving things about how it was designed was doing it with scalability in mind, so that it just scales with Moore's law. And there are some other things too. It,
But
you know, did a lot of.
could Solana become the high frequency trading aspect of ETH 2.0?
So it's, you know, I do think that, like,
Imagine you use Curve.finance,
right.
you collateralize yourself, use Aave, collateralize yourself, get some liquidity on Curve, log this liquidity, go to Solana, high frequency trading, margin trading, and then get back into ETH 2.0.
Yeah, you could definitely do it. And I think that's one of the visions here, and I think that's one way.
Well, I mean, the vision of
Solana,
Solana, because of the integration of potentially the EVM inside, is basically being able to plug and play or drag and fork any smart contract writing in Solidity or Viper into the Solana virtual machine, and then you just like bootstrap an auto market maker really easily, or you bootstrap a server really easy.
And so, yeah, I think that, like, part of this is, like, as you're sort of getting at, like, sometimes the best layer 2 is something that can also be a layer 1, something where you can go to the layer 2, but rather than you go there for a specific thing, it happens, and then you jump back. It's like you go there and there's a whole ecosystem there, and you stay in there as long as that's important.
Yeah, looping, they do that, and it's 3 minutes before.
Oh yeah, I think that loopring is a good. Loopring's vision is more X, whereas I think the Serum and Solana vision is more like a giant financial ecosystem, all on the same blockchain, all with composability within itself.
That's a big vision.
Yeah, it is big. And then the other thing that I'd say is, like, that's one direction, but, like, at some point you might start to ask, like, what's the layer 1 and what's the layer 2? You know, is it really the case that, like, you know, ETH 2.0 and that story is a layer 1 and that Solana is layer 2? What's that even mean? And you know, why is it that people are going back to ETH 2.0 and paying, you know, because, like, you're limited in how much you can do there. And so, like,
well, yeah, yes and no, because you could,
yeah.
I mean, look, the gas price was about actually reached 1,000 gwei, but people were still, like, making transaction on the network. So your argument is, oh, it's too expensive, it's a slow, and retail cannot access the network. Why? The question, the counter answer is, why no one actually want and start using Tezos or Cosmos or Polkadot? You know, they were, like, all doing transaction on Ethereum.
Right. So it's a good question. Like, why, given this, are people still using Ethereum? And not using the other things? So why is almost all the action still on Ethereum? And basically, I think there are two things. First of all, this problem gets worse the more you try and scale. Like, Ethereum cannot really support what it has right now, but it definitely can't support 100 times that. I think the more impossible it gets. But the second thing is that it's where the community is, and there's huge lock-in effects there. I mean, it's just, like, really, really powerful. And, like, wherever people are is where they're gonna stay in most cases, and it's a big production for people to try out a new ecosystem. And then the third is that it's extremely heavily incentivized. Projects have dropped billions of dollars of tokens to pay people to use DeFi over the last 4 months. And yeah, sure, people are going to use Ethereum if they're getting paid collectively $3 million a day to do it. But, like, at some point that
well, I mean, you can also get paid on Cosmos or Polkadot.
Oh yeah, you could. So far, people haven't been doing it. There haven't been big U farms on most of those, but that doesn't mean there won't be. And I think an interesting thing.
Look, for example, at Near Protocol. Now, whoever deploy the contract, they get 30% of whatever is made through the contract, or something like that, on gas optimization or something, which is very interesting. Yep. I thought that was pretty smart from them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like, as we start to see yield showing up on these other chains, it's going to be really interesting to see to what extent people who
I
don't
mean, for us, I mean,
move over and try it out.
I used to be a Bitcoin maximalist, and then I became Ethereum maximalist. I mean, Bitcoin in I was involved like in 2011 and all the stuff, and then became Ethereum maximalist. And now I'm more like a blockchain crypto maximalist. I'm still like Ethereum cap, but obviously for you or for me as a trader, market maker, liquidity provider, whatever, it's basically interoperability is probably our biggest hedge in the space. So, I mean, because more volume, more liquidity, more opportunity, more arbitrage, very smart arbitrage coming. But if you're actually choosing one of them, like Serum is choosing Solana, then you're basically putting yourself very exposed to one network, except if you're short or long and other asset. But
right. So it's a good question, and part of this is that like there are other networks I'm excited about as well, and that I've been sort of talking with the teams on and stuff. The other part is that like I am really excited about the scaling of Serum and of Solana, and Solana is actually just more scaling than most of the other ones. Even most of the other big fast ones, Solana is more scaling than.
Yeah, because Solana is hardware scaling, so you cannot compete with that.
And then the third thing that I would say is that there's a difference between what you bet on as a builder, and to some extent, this is like this is where we're building right now, and like I'm pretty excited about it as a place to build.
So
but also like,
would you say you have the builder side, the builder aspect of yourself, and you have the entrepreneur trader, and those they conflict between each other all the time?
Yeah, they do sometimes conflict, and I think both of them are excited about Solana. But whereas one of them is excited about Solana and also sees potential for other chains, the other right now is sort of like, well, yeah, but also I'm building on Solana right now, and so like that's sort of where my attention is focused. And and so I think because you don't have composability between these chains, and because there's a pain in learning new ones, it's there's advantages on what you're working on. Although that's a different thing from necessarily telling everyone else that it's like clearly the best.
So you said like the vision of Serum, it's probably bigger than just a crypto exchange. It's like a big ecosystem, and my question is regarding of like the recent activity that you've been part of, and whatever the public has been saying is, would you consider yourself? I mean, this was a community question, but would you consider yourself as a hero or a villain like whatever you're trying to achieve?
Right.
Because obviously,
well, yeah, I totally hear you. And I think what I'd say is, first of all, it depends on what your thoughts are and what you value and what your beliefs are in this space. I'm excited about what I'm doing, and I think the way I see the biggest things I'm doing is trying to build out what I think are the best products that I can. And I think that that's what is most important for this space, and I think that's what's going to move it forward. And I think
are you still like into altruism, effective altruism?
Yep.
So basically, you're here to make money, but you're also here to distribute money, wealth.
Yeah, and like all this money is going to get donated in the end, and I do think that's like important and core to what I'm doing. But I also don't want to sort of use that as a crutch necessarily.
Are those information like on chain, or you donate on chain data, like people could?
Unfortunately, charities are not currently really on chain, alas. Actually, some of them
are.
Well,
I think like this was a question like, I mean, the previous one, like community was. I mean, my guess, if I was you, but I'm not, but I could see what is your game. Like basically, apparently you're a big fan of fork. You're a big fan of what people have been calling vampire liquidity sucking or whatever. So I think like people on Twitter, they were like, okay, well, he forked got in control of one of the biggest fork in the DeFi history. So Uniswap got involved in Cream, got involved like in a few different things, and now has like a lot of liquidity on your SushiSwap. So the best move, and don't say this is alpha leak because you probably like already thought about it, is to basically incentivize people to provide liquidity on SushiSwap, lock those assets, and then bridge them into Serum, and then distribute kind of like equity of serum for people that whatever got involved in SushiSwap. So basically, you're doing like vampire on a bigger scale, on a protocol scale, bringing 1 billion assets from Ethereum into Solana Serum exchange.
I mean, I think that like I don't want to sort of deny that as like a piece of what's going on, but I think it's not the only thing that's going on. And I think that like there are lots of ways to move assets over, and I think that like in the end, rather than viewing it as like here's the plan to move these assets over, I think the way I view it is like here's a plan to get products people want and on Solana, and if that happens, then hopefully there will be growth. And like
I mean, at the end of the day, we can. I believe like if we blockchain people or crypto and we believe in the vision, I think there is a space for, like, the goal is to capture liquidity from outside, so traditional finance, rather than trying to compete with each other. So
yeah, and I see people's point there, and I think that there's a real thing there of like strategies to move assets over. I mean, frankly, this is not a new idea. This is not the first vampire. All of DeFi is a fucking vampire here, right? Like the whole shtick of DeFi right now is paying billions of dollars to get people to provide fake volume in places to pump up DeFi pulse ratings. Like that's what's been happening for the last 4 months.
well,
And to teach people to use the protocol.
DeFi post is not accurate. They cannot get the numbers, so I'm not sure. But
they they try. And so like I think that like that's what DeFi's been. That's what yield farming is, right? And like yeah, to some extent, sure. Like you can do that cross chain.
so you're saying like Uniswap and Curve and then all the biggest DeFi projects are just like vaporware.
Oh yeah, they're just bleeding money. Well, no, separately they might also be good projects, but independent of whether they're good projects, they're also just like paying millions of dollars to get people to.
I mean, recently,
use
I mean, Uniswap and Curve.finance, they didn't have a token. Like this is pretty new, like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, but there's no volume on them when they didn't have tokens. And then
that's
like,
not true. That's not true. There was like reasonable of I mean, that's not true. Like compared to the TVL, we reached out like beginning of the year 1 billion TVL, and on those platforms they were like more than hundreds of millions of US dollars. So meaning that most of those 2 platforms were actually capturing most of the TVL on the ecosystem.
So prior to there are a lot of other projects that incentivize people with tokens to put assets in Uniswap, like for instance SushiSwap before it forked. Before yield farming was a thing, the total historical volume of all of DeFi combined was less than a single busy day's volume on FTX. It's just like
how much was that?
Meaning that like $1 billion. I think like all of DeFi volume. All of DeFi volume put together historically, not in one day, like every trade ever in DeFi being $1 billion, like there are centralized exchanges that fake more volume than that every single day and have for years. And there are centralized exchanges that have more volume than that legitimately and have every day.
Like Uniswap was doing like 100 million before having a token, like per day. Curve was doing like more
before the Uni token,
million.
But not before other people were paying people to use Uniswap with their tokens. If you mark to before yield farming started, so before Compound launched, the total historical Uniswap volume was tiny.
Yeah, but tiny because the I mean, yeah, okay, we could actually look into the number, but I believe they were the percentage of. I mean, now the entire TVL of lock asset in DeFi, I think it's above 4 billion. If you take a percentage of that, I think it was actually Uniswap and Curve. They had higher percentage of the entire TVL that they have now. Because, for example, like
but the entire TVL is super inflated right now.
Are you saying this is like wash trading and all this stuff?
Oh yeah, it's all wash trading.
Yeah,
and it's all just people. I mean, it's a different phrasing of it, right? Like you kind of rejigger things in a different way. It's the same effect, right? If you're paying $3 million a day for people to use your platform, yeah, they're going to be like experience on watch trading, or at least most of it will be. That's like what happens. Like this is not a new thing. Centralized exchanges went through this fad a year and a half ago. For 6 months, CoinMarketCap was completely unusable because nothing but fake exchanges with wash trading at the top, incentivized by trans mining. 12 months later, real players and not huge ones but real ones, and most of them went under or sort of like not relevant once the yield went away. Now DeFi might do better than that, right? Like we've been through that before, and maybe DeFi learned the lesson. And the lesson is if you better be making your product better in the meantime, so that when the yield ends, people stay. And I think that's going to be one of the big questions of DeFi is it doing that? Like it's massive advertising budget basically
I mean,
to
if
kind of
you
like hype it up, and
well,
then
if you have like
yeah.
true value and true real utility in your project, like for example, like Curve.finance is trying to capture the FX market. So you do a lot of transaction per day. You charge us an admin fee. You distribute back to the LP, and you distribute back to the people that have equity in the company.
Yep.
Then you basically don't need yield farming. And you're solving a real problem of being able. Imagine you being able to swap USD into euro or Chinese coin, then it's massive. It's a massive utility on the market.
So Curve, I think, makes some sense because like stable coins are one of the things that makes some sense.
Well, stablecoin,
AMMs,
apparently the people are saying that stablecoin will take 80% of the entire market of crypto.
I mean,
60,
I don't know what it
60,
means for them to
80%.
take them. I don't think it's a well-defined thing, right? Like right now, are people saying dollars take most of the market of crypto because there's like $100 trillion? Like, no one just decides that dollars are part of crypto. But as soon as you tokenize it, dollars on crypto increasing. But when it's just dollars sitting in Gemini's or Coinbase's bank account, no one counted it. The line between those, so I think it's like not super well defined. But and the fact that they're redeemable means it's not like revenue to be issuing these necessarily. But I think the other thing I'd say is just that I do think stable coins are kind of cool. I think Curve is a cool product. Now it's worth knowing there's some pretty fucking tight FX and stablecoin swaps outside of DeFi. Like if you want to do this in CeFi, in most cases you're going to get way better execution. There are some exceptions. I think Curve is probably the best place for DAI liquidity right now. That's what it has going for it. Is that like things which are stable coins but not really pegged. I think Curve's the best place for it. I think it's a reasonable product for it. But the fact that there's some use case doesn't mean the majority of the numbers are real and would survive a lack of yield. It just means that like some of them would.
Yeah.
And I think the drop off probably is pretty huge. I think in general you get like a factor of 10 drop off or so.
So what's the vision with Serum? Are you going to try to avoid people doing wash trading and all this stuff? I mean, what's the short term, medium, and long term vision of Serum, FTX, and Alameda Research?
Like, the vision for Serum long term is like, build the skeleton for people to be able to build the most powerful DeFi ecosystem we can. And see how big that can get and see how much it can do, with sort of the stretch goal being getting a lot of the world's activity happening on it.
Is your goal to have like Serum bigger than FTX?
I think Serum's goal is, and I think FTX's goal is to be bigger than Serum, and I think that's fine. Like I think to some extent there's just this thing of like, could you may the best man win.
What would be the best strategy to merge?
You could try and merge it. The problem with this, and the reason that Serum is not part of FTX, that was started as an independent project, is that FTX is not decentralized. It's centralized. And I think there are pros and cons to that, but it is what it is. And having a centralized exchange run a decentralized exchange is sort of an interesting concept. And it's not clear what that, and it's not clear what it means even to run or to merge a decentralized exchange into something. Like it's not like a company or anything like that. And to the extent it did mean something, does that mean it's no longer decentralized?
You could build a Serum DAO, and then have FTX as an operating company of one vertical of the Serum DAO.
Yep, you could definitely do it that way, and there'd be sort of like corporate simplicities to it. But I think it's probably not what people want for Serum. I think I'm not sure about this, but like a lot of the pitch of Serum is that it's decentralized.
And also your vision is Serum to be the biggest decentralized exchange, and FTX is to be the biggest CeFi exchange. So going after BitMEX and I would say like Binance, but I presume you have CZ on the board of Serum, which people have been like saying it's a little bit.
Well, there is no board of Serum, and
not Serum, but maybe Serum, but FTX.
Oh, of FTX. Understood. There's, he does not play any sort of role in running or managing FTX. Obviously, I talked to him some, and like, I've sort of asked for, advice on, we've chatted about things, given feedback to each other, and, work together when it makes sense. And
So last
I
time,
think there's
so
been,
last time, so
but
basically when I moved my activity in stake capital activity inside, saying that I was migrating them from Binance to FTX, basically I migrated them to the same guy.
no. So while we have talked some, he has no visibility. He said no, like, ability to look at like accounts in FTX. He doesn't do any day-to-day managing of it. FTX is a totally independent entity, and that was sort of very intentionally done. In the investment is that, like, he's an investor into it, or Binance is an investor into it, but doesn't have any control over it. There's no controlling stake there. FTX is
Yeah,
total operational
just
independence.
investment side. Anyone can invest in a company.
Exactly.
He's an investor.
Yeah, and so the way I would think about it is basically,
It's a good.
he was a
It's a
decent sized.
very good hedge for him, because obviously if you take over, that's what you do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the way sort of, I think the way he was thinking about it was like, yeah, there's probably going to be some opportunity to collaborate on things. We have done that some with Binance before, but that the primary piece of this, but that, it wouldn't become part of the Binance ecosystem. And I think that's like one big difference, that often Binance does acquisitions or something, they become, part of the Binance ecosystem. FTX, it was not an acquisition, it was not part of the Binance ecosystem at all. Although, obviously we want to work with any partners that we can, and work with Binance and other exchanges when it makes sense.
Do you
But
work with BitMEX?
BitMEX doesn't tend to partner with other exchanges, really. We'd be, potentially open to if they're something that made sense about a few things at various points, but they tend to have sort of their solitary island. Like, as opposed to Binance will be, OKEX, and to a lesser extent, Coinbase, Gemini, and to a greater extent, places like BitMEX and Bitrex and places. There's some exchanges that are sort of like big on sort of partnerships, and there's some that's like, here's our island, we're just going to build it, and it like isn't going to interact with any others. And BitMEX is very much in that second category. So it's like hard to think of a partnership.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Anyone,
So what would be your quote if Arthur quote is ETH is a 2-digit shit tokens? What would be yours?
I think that, like, I'm really excited about a lot of things that the space has done so far, but looking forward, there's a lot left to do, and there's a lot further to go, and it's still a tiny fraction of what it could be. And I think that we should be thinking really hard about what we need to do to get from here to there. And a lot of the ethos behind FTX is like, boy, these derivatives exchanges don't have their shit together. There's like a lot of really important improvements that can prevent hundreds of millions of dollars a year of clawbacks and massive UI shit shows, and sort of try to take some steps forward for it. I think the philosophy of Serum is something similar for DeFi. It's like, it's really cool stuff that's happened. It's not scaling, and what would be, what do I think might be a way to take a step towards a vision of the future for it?
Okay, I think that's the last word. Yeah, so thank you, Sam. I mean, except if you want to add something. I think there was
it's just
there was an
general,
incredible
excited to work with people. So
there was an incredible kind of like chat interview. We've been like for an hour and a half, and I feel like it went very fast. No, thank you for your time. Yeah, so I'm going to stop recording, and thanks for your time, Sam. If you don't want to add anything.
Nope. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was my first interview, so thank you for your time.